everyone, and welcome to my channel, Square Wave 2. I've just come back from visiting my very favorite antique store, the Country Fair Antique Mall in Saugus, California. That is Saugus, Southern California. I've had my eye on a certain item up there for over a year, and I finally broke down and I bought it. I've got it in the shop today and I'd like to show it to you. Yes, it's another radio, but not a shortwave radio. It is an AM table model radio made in 1932. I think this is the oldest radio I've ever worked on. It's a Philco Model 80, and it was also called the Junior Cathedral model. Now, these radios are not that scarce today. You can go to eBay and find half a dozen of them for sale at any time, but not like this radio. This radio is in almost perfect condition, and for an 87-year-old radio, that makes it quite unusual. The case is beautiful, the finish is beautiful, all the hardware is original, nobody's been inside yet. Knobs are original, even the speaker cloth is in very good shape. Let's take a closer look at this radio. Just look at this beautiful front panel on an 87-year-old radio. The finish is very, very nice. There are no cuts, no scuff marks, no dings, no scratches. And here are two original Philco knobs, both in perfect condition. The dial scale is in very good condition, and the bezel around the dial scale is beautiful. All hardware on this radio, inside and outside, is original hardware. And just look at the speaker grill cloth. It's absolutely beautiful. It looks almost new. Incredible for an 87-year-old radio. Now I have to make a comment about these two controls. First, the on-off volume control. Philco decided to put the volume pot between the antenna input and the antenna coil. So what it does is control the strength of the incoming signal. Apparently Philco was relying upon some very strong AM broadcast signals. Of course, on modern radios, the volume control is right after the second detector. It controls the output of the second detector. Now, as we all know, tuning on a super heterodyne radio is very sensitive, very critical. And unfortunately, this tuning knob is turning the tuning capacitor directly. There's no vernier reduction, no gear reduction, no pulley reduction. So tuning is a little bit tricky. You have to be very careful to center the signal. Here's what the left side of the radio looks like, and it too is almost perfect. Here's a shot of the right side of the radio, and it's almost perfect. Let's take a look under the hood. Over here we have two 36 tubes. This one is the second detector. This one is the oscillator mixer. These are the old style tubes with only 5 pins and a grid cap on the top. The signal enters the tube through the grid cap and leaves the tube through pin 2, which is the plate pin. Over here we have a number 80 full wave power rectifier. Way in the back here where you can't see it is a number 42 output tube that drives the speaker. And back over here is a gigantic Thordartson power transformer. Really big, really heavy. I'm sure it was designed to work in a radio with much heavier power requirements than the little Model 80. Here we have two metal cans that contain the original electrolytic capacitors. I've replaced both of them under the chassis with new capacitors. And here we have 3 metal cans. One contains the antenna coil, one contains the oscillator coil, and one contains the IF transformer, the intermediate transformer coils. Down here we have 4 holes in the chassis. Behind each hole is a little variable capacitor to align the set. Now I have a question about this second detector tube. I'm hoping one of my viewers can give me the answer. Every photograph I've seen of the Model 80 has a tube shield on the second detector tube. My radio did not come with a tube shield, and I'm wondering, is it supposed to have a shield on this tube? Perhaps one of my viewers can answer this for me. This was Philco's entry-level economy radio. It sold for $18.75. Remember, the stock market had just crashed in 1929, so 1932 was not an especially good time to be selling a luxury item like a radio. Philco wanted to keep the cost down, so they took some shortcuts. I think everybody knows that until fairly recent times, all AM table radios had 5 tubes. In fact, they were nicknamed the All-American Fives. Now remember that tubes are very expensive in the early days of radio, so Philco decided to eliminate one and make a 4-tube radio. And what tube could they eliminate? Well, they eliminated the intermediate frequency amplifier tube. That is the IF amplifier tube. They had a super heterodyne radio. It had an IF intermediate frequency transformer, but no IF tube. And they tried to make up for this with a little Mickey Mouse regenerative circuit, which worked sometimes, but not always very well. So Philco had a true super heterodyne radio. It had an IF transformer, but no IF amplifier tube. After a thorough inspection, I decided to bring the radio up slowly on a variac. You don't want to wake up an 87-year-old radio too quickly. It might take a stroke. So I turned up the variac slowly, and when I approached operating voltage, I began to hear the AC hum, which got louder and louder. This was no surprise to me. It just meant that the filter capacitors had to be replaced. And so I replaced 2 filter capacitors. I also noticed that the AC cord was kind of frayed and unsafe, so I replaced that. And then the radio worked perfectly. No problems. Now for you radio guys out there, I have to admit, I did not mess around with the Bakelite blocks that hold the paper capacitors and are stuffed with tar. I didn't want to get into tar. I wouldn't know what I was doing. And I've learned a long time ago that if something works, do not repair it. Just think of all the fascinating news stories this receiver would have delivered to its first owner in 1932. News of the FDR election, news of Amelia Earhart flying over the Atlantic Ocean, news of Nazi Germany invading Poland, and much more. Remember, in those days, radio was the only source of immediate mass communication. I like to think of all the owners this radio has had over the years. Am I the 10th owner, the 11th owner, 15th owner? What owner am I? Apparently, all these many owners valued this little receiver, took care of it, and put it away carefully when it was replaced by a newer, more modern receiver with more tubes, more powerful, and perhaps with a shortwave band or 2. We have to thank all the owners of this radio for preserving a piece of American history, a piece of radio history, and a piece of electronic history. I thank them all.
Stories as to why people look to increase their revenue.
Some stories make us laugh, some make us cry.
These stories, combined with our own, have motivated Ken and I to dedicate our lives to help people as